So if you have an impulse, something to do or say, be sure to do it. The superconscious mind explains remarkable events. First of all, it explains serendipity, which is what I just talked about in a way. It's the process of making happy discoveries. Remember, there were three princes of Serendip. It's a fairy tale who go around the countryside in the days of old, and wherever they went, people would make happy discoveries. And for example, they would go into this farm, and while they're at the farm, the major storm comes up, and the river rages, and the river washes away half of the farm. And the farmer is in despair, he said, and they're very, very cheerful. They said, well, let's not be in despair. You never know what good could come of this. And they go out on the farm, and the river has washed away the dust from a massive bank of jewels and precious stones that made the farmer one of the richest men in the kingdom. And if the flood had not come along and washed away half of the farm, they would have never found all those precious stones. You probably heard this story in Charlie Wilson's War. It's a very famous story where, and this comes from the Princes of Serendip. He tells about this old story. Is the horse, the farmer's horse gets away. The barn is open, and the horse runs away. This is in the olden days, many years ago. And the horse runs away, and they say, oh, what a shame, you have lost your horse. And the farmer says, well, it's too early to tell. There might be something good come of it. And 3 or 4 days later, the horse comes running back, and he's bringing back a whole herd of wild horses, beautiful horses. And they all come thundering back, and they manage to round them up and put them in the corral. And now the farmer has more horses than anyone else in the entire area. And the people say, boy, that's really fortunate. Got all those horses. He says, well, it's a little bit too early to tell. You never know. And then his son takes one of the horses and tries to break it. Wild horse, break it so it can be domesticated, and falls off and breaks his leg. And they said, oh, that's a terrible tragedy. Your son broke his leg. And he says, yes, but we don't know for sure yet whether it's good or bad. And then along comes the army recruiting. This is what they do. They would go through the villages and recruit every able-bodied man into the army and train them on the march to the big battle with the war that was on. And they couldn't take his son because his son had a broken leg. They said, oh, you're certainly fortunate your son had a broken leg. And yes, you never can tell. And the army went out and got into a major battle, and everyone was killed. Saved the son's life. But the whole thing was you never can tell. It might be good. It might be bad. It might be good. So this attitude, you get stuck. You go to a restaurant, and the restaurant says, we've lost your reservation. You can't get in. So you can get upset or say, well, maybe it's a good idea. Maybe we should go to a different restaurant. Maybe that other restaurant will be even better. So serendipity means you're always going to find happy things happening in your life. But here's the one key to the principle of serendipity is the only people who find happy things or make happy discoveries are people looking for something. They're looking for happiness, they're looking for success, they're looking for goals, they're looking for something, and as a result, they keep making happy discoveries. Many business people who've decided to start a business and don't have any money, somebody will loan them a book, and in the book will be a principle, and the principle will be what they needed, and later on they're wealthy and they live in big houses on the hill, and they trace it back to that one chapter in that one book that one friend gave them when they had started off their business and they were struggling. So be open to making happy discoveries, okay? Now, the second principle, and this is really interesting, many books have been written on this, and this is all scientific stuff. It's called synchronicity. A synchronicity is the process or coincidence of events in which 2 or 3 things that are totally unrelated happen simultaneously together to help you achieve your goal. So let me give you an example here. I have my pens. So let us say that you decide, geez, I would love to take a vacation and go to Hawaii, okay? You're reading the paper, you're watching television, you see something there. Boy, it's been a long time, but I'd like to take a week and go to Maui. But geez, I can't afford it, I don't have the time off, and so on. Well, then something happens. You go to work, and your boss says, you've really been working hard. Why don't you take a vacation? Take a week off. Well, you were just sort of thinking about that this morning, but you say, yeah, I'd like to, but I can't afford it. And then you get an IRS check back for $3,000 for your taxes. And then your wife says, I was just talking to Susan, she works over at that travel agency, and they have this special fam trip that you can go on, and you can get 7 days and 8 days and 7 nights in Maui, and it's only $1,235. Although it would normally be vastly more. And something else happens. Now, all of these events, you see, are separate in time and space. They only have one thing that binds them together. The one thing that binds them together is your goal. So this is called synchronicity, when a series of unrelated events occur that have only one meaning, and the meaning is the goal that you set. So be alert to synchronicity in your life. It's the most amazing damn thing, and everybody here has experienced it before, but sometimes you experience it and say, wasn't that amazing? What a coincidence. You know, I was just talking about that this morning, and somebody called this afternoon. And you say, wow, isn't that interesting? Well, this is what happens when the superconscious mind works. So in the logical world, things have a cause and effect relationship. In the superconscious world, now you do this, you get that. In the superconscious mind, things have a synchronicity relationship. It's completely unrelated events happen, sometimes on the other side of the world, that cause you to be successful. Here's an example. Car sales are down for U.S. car makers. But suddenly, the biggest Japanese car makers can't get parts because of the tsunami and the nuclear reactor. And so what has happened? There's been an upsurge of sales in American cars. Have you noticed that? That would be worth hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. It may transfer people's loyalties from Japanese cars to American cars. It could save people's careers. I mean, the number of ripple effects from that. But you can be sure of one thing, is that everybody working in the American car industry was hoping and wishing and praying and dreaming for something that would happen to increase the sales of their cars. And then things happen on the other side of the world that are completely unpredictable and inexplicable. So watch for synchronicity, and the more you watch for it, the more it will happen. Events are organized on the basis of meaning, and the significance they have are defined by you and the goals that you have. It's the meaning of the events. So number 13, it contains all monitor circuits for pre-programming. Now, a monitor circuit means that you can actually pre-program your mind. And the way you do it, you remember that your subconscious mind and your superconscious can only respond to positive commands. I used to teach karate, and the karate school that I took over had been run by an ex-sergeant from the military, and he was always telling people, don't do this and don't do that and stop doing this and stop doing that. And what I learned before I took over the school is that a person cannot visualize a negative command. In other words, we can't visualize don't do something. If I say to you, don't trip, you cannot create a visualization of not tripping, but if I say pick up your feet, you can see clearly, pick up your feet. So always when you give instruction, you give positive instruction, do it this way, rather than that, do it this way. Well, a monitor circuit only accepts commands that are positive. So you don't say, I want to remember not to forget my keys. So what you do is you say, remember to take my keys with me when I leave. Remember to take that out of the refrigerator before I go. Remember to pick this up when I'm on my way home. Remember to do this. And when you say that, your superconscious mind takes it, and exactly at the moment you're walking past that table, it'll twig it into your arm, your mind, and you'll get the keys. It's the most amazing darn thing, and you've all had this experience. Well, there's two places where monitor circuits are used, and you can use it for anything. You can pre-program yourself to call somebody, to stop off, to pick something up, to do something, and so on. And the first place, the two ways where people program their minds is, first of all, with parking spaces. There are people, Barbara is even better at it than I am, who always get parking spaces. Yesterday we went to a restaurant, and the restaurant was jammed. You know, everything was busy Friday night. The restaurant was absolutely jammed, and we drove around in the parking lot, and there was not a single, even illegal place that you could park. And Barbara said, well, go up to the front. There'll be one right by the front door. Well, I had just driven past the front door, and there weren't any parking spaces there, and men don't like women to give them instructions about driving. And so I drove all the way around and got all the way back to the front door, and someone had just left from the parking spot right into the front door. I just drove into the parking spot and literally walked 6 feet into the restaurant. It was empty. In other words, somebody had been holding the space for us and was waiting until we had come full circle around and then backed out and drove away. Now, the other place that you can get parking, and by the way, I've taught this many times, the key is, do you believe that you can get a parking space? If you do, you will. The second place is waking up without an alarm clock. Is there anybody here who wakes up without an alarm clock? Yeah. What you do is you can make a decision to wake up at any time you want for the rest of your life, and you'll never wake up. You never need an alarm clock. Your body actually will start, and even I travel as many as 12 time zones in a day. I've spoken in Ekaterinburg, Russia. That's 12 time zones from San Diego. Flown all the way there via Frankfurt, via Moscow to Ekaterinburg, 12 hours time change. I can go to sleep and wake up exactly on the minute that I set my mind for in Ekaterinburg time. So it has nothing to do with time zones or anything else. And it's very powerful. Here's another thing. There are a lot of people who get colds and flus. Do you know why people get colds and flus? It's because they don't decide not to. It's really simple. I used to get speeding tickets. I got three in one trip once. I mean, that's terrible. I made a decision about 15 or 20 years ago. I don't get speeding tickets anymore. I drive without ever getting speeding tickets. That sounds like a negative command, but it's not. And you'll say, we only had one speeding ticket in 15, 20 years. Is I just program, and you know what? I'll slow down. I'll end up slowing down, and surprise, surprise, there's a bubblegum car by the side of the road with the radar on. And I'll slow down, and the next person goes whipping past, and the bubblegum car goes on and takes them off and go, I never get speeding tickets because I program my mind not to have speeding tickets, and your superconscious mind will tell you if there's danger of a speeding ticket, and you'll actually slow down. Now, the other thing is with colds and flus, is you can make a decision today, I do not have colds and flus. I'm perfectly healthy, I never have colds and flus. That sounds like a negative command, and it is, but it's the only way I can put it, and you know what, you never have colds again. People have colds because they decide to or they don't decide not to. And I've met people, anybody here never has a cold? Never has flu? No, never have it. Why? Because you decided not to. And if it comes knocking on the door and you have a little bit of sniffle, you say, get out of here. Get out of here. I don't believe, all right, I'll go next door. I go next door, and your next door neighbor's got a cold for a week. Just make a decision never to have colds and flus. And what will happen is, since colds and flus are not caused by viruses or anything else, they're caused usually by stress, usually by fatigue, usually by some other things, just decide not to have colds and flus. And it saves you a lot of time and trouble. But anything you want, program it in, and you'll be astonished how fast it comes to you. Now, activating the superconscious mind, this is what we do. The master method of activation of the superconscious mind is solitude. Most people have never spent an hour in solitude in their entire lives. The very thought of doing it makes them very uncomfortable. And yet solitude throughout the ages is the most powerful way to tune directly into this massive mind and literally mainline ideas and information from the superconscious. And the way that you do it is, first of all, you go into the silence for 30 to 60 minutes. It's called going into the silence. Now, that means you don't have radio or television or coffee or cigarettes or newspapers or, in my case, not even classical music. You just go and sit somewhere perfectly silently for 30 to 60 minutes. Now, the first 25 to 26 minutes of this exercise will be excruciatingly painful. You will twist and turn. You'll want to get up and go something and adjust a picture frame and make a phone call. It's almost like you've got ants inside you because it's so hard to sit absolutely perfectly still, relaxed for 30 minutes. By the way, when you begin to use the taped affirmation CD, which you will receive tomorrow, when you begin to use this on a regular basis, you'll find it's very easy to relax quickly, to go into a deep state of very healthy relaxation. You'll finally reach the point where you can do it in a matter of seconds. Just by regular practice, your body says, oh, deep relaxation, bang, monitor circuits. It's programmed in. You don't have to wait a long time to go calm. So when you're sitting there for 25 to 30 minutes, about that point, you'll start to go calm, and all the energy, all the fidgetiness will disappear, and you'll just go calm. And it's almost like a bucket full of silty water. It'll sit there, and if you leave it sit there for a while, the water goes completely clear. And this is what happens to your mind. Your mind goes completely clear. And after the 30-minute point, what will happen is ideas will start to flow like a river. They just start to flow through your mind. And this is non-directed. In other words, you don't think of this or think of that problem or think of that goal. And you just focus on your breathing. Just relax, look out into the horizon, look at the picture on the wall or a flower. Some people look at a candle, but just look at it, keep your eyes open. This is not meditation. Just sit there quietly, and at a certain point, ideas will start to come. And almost like a boat in a gentle pond, the idea that you need to solve your biggest problem or to achieve your most important goal, like a little boat, just dock in your mind, and there it will be crystal clear. And it's the most amazing darn thing. If you've never done it before, the first time you do it, you'll get a result. You'll get an insight, an idea, a solution to a problem, an idea to solve a goal. The first time you do it, it'll be absolutely marvelous. And the next time you do it, you'll get it again. And every time you sit quietly in solitude for 30 to 60 minutes, you'll get ideas that may save you years of hard work. Now, Thomas Edison had an accident when he was young that he was running to get onto a train. He was selling stuff on a train when he was about a 10-year-old, and the train conductor reached over and grabbed him. He was running behind. He couldn't get on the train. He was carrying his stuff. The train conductor reached over and grabbed him by the ears and pulled him onto the train by the ears. For the rest of Thomas Edison's life, he had great difficulties in hearing. It almost destroyed his hearing. He could hear if he got close enough. But fortunately, if he wasn't paying much attention, he didn't have to listen to all the chatter going on. And so what he would do is right there in his studio, throughout the day, he would take 45-minute naps, sometimes 45-second naps. Whenever he was working on an invention, which he worked on for decades, worked on, as we say, hundreds for decades, whenever he reached a stumping point, he'd just go into a state, close his eyes, because he couldn't hear anything, close his eyes and just breathe deeply and relax for a few seconds or a few minutes, and then come out, and he'd have the idea. And he came up with idea after idea after idea by doing this. That's why you'll also get ideas from meditation. Whether it's meditation in the silence or guided meditation with music and imagery, you'll get ideas. Whenever you calm your mind or let your mind go completely calm, what happens is the superconscious mind functions. It's almost like an electrical storm goes off and lightning begins to fly. There are many people who've had superconscious solutions where pages of answers and pages of ideas and even pages of scientific formulations have come to them. You've heard the story of Mozart. Remember the movie Amadeus, where Salieri, it was true story, the court composer of the Austrian king, the Austrian emperor, and he was so jealous of Mozart because Mozart, he said, would sit there and write music as though taking dictation from some higher power. Whereas Salieri would work and write compositions and correct them over and over again, Mozart said he could see the composition note perfect in his mind. And until he saw it note perfect, he wouldn't start writing. And when it was note perfect, he would then transcribe it. And it could be played from the transcription perfectly the first time. They said he created the most beautiful music in the world as though he were taking dictation. All great classical music, all great inventions, all great insights come from the superconscious mind. All the great classical composers who wrote the most beautiful music in history tuned into the superconscious mind, and it poured through them onto paper. Beethoven, as you know, was deaf for much of his adult life. Beethoven never heard his music played. He was totally deaf, and yet he could hear the music in his head and see it with such clarity, he could write down the most incredible music in the world that would be played by the great symphony orchestras of the world forever. Remember that, what is that 1815 suite? Bum, 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 bum. Remember that? Bum, 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 bum. I mean, nobody who's ever heard that ever forgets that. 5 beats, yet so beautifully put together in the way they were hit and spaced that you remember it all your life. You hear it the first time and you remember what's coming, and the symphony is really music. And he could not hear that. He never heard it, but he saw it in his mind. So go into the silence for 30 to 60 minutes. Listen to the still, small voice within. Earl Nightingale once said, people who start to listen to their intuition, if you do, you'll never make another mistake. You'll never make another mistake if you listen to that inner voice, because the inner voice will always be true and will always be correct. So we say, activating the superconscious mind, another way, is to define the problem or goal clearly. Gather information, talk to other people, do as much research as possible. Don't try to figure it out yourself. Concentrate single-mindedly on the problem. Don't try to do a whole bunch of other things. Just keep focusing on this one problem, this one goal, this one obstacle, and then release it and get your mind busy elsewhere. If after you've done all these things, gathered all the information, you cannot think of a thing to do, just turn your mind somewhere else and let your superconscious mind work day and night. At a certain point, the answer will just pop up. So, there are 3 sources of a superconscious solution. The first is intuition. It comes from within. And as we say, the still small voice is sometimes so loud that it drowns out everything. You hear that answer and you go, wow, geez, this is it. And you get up and you're excited. There's this famous story of Archimedes, a mathematician in ancient Greece, who was asked to determine whether or not the crown that he had bought, the gold crown, had been watered down with copper or with bronze. And he was trying to figure out how you could measure the content, the true content of any metallic object, especially a crown. And he came up with the idea. He was in the bathtub, and he's sitting in the bath, and as he sat in the bath, the water level went up and down as he sat up and laid down. And he suddenly realized you could tell the volume by putting it in water and measuring the amount of water that was displaced by it. And he was so excited, he jumped out of the bathtub, and he was running down the streets of Athens, stark naked, saying, "I have found it, I have found it, I have found it." And does anybody remember that story? I have found it. And the words for "I have found it" are in Greek are eureka. I have found it, eureka. Do you know what the state motto of California is? Eureka. And you know why? It's because when people came out to the gold fields, when Sutter found gold in his mill, he came back and he said, "Oh my God, you won't believe what I found." And that became the state motto, Eureka, I have found it. And that's what the miners would say. The prospectors that came out in the gold rush, when they finally found gold in their pan, they said, "I found it, I found it, I found it." Eureka. And it comes from Archimedes, 2,500 years before. And so this intuition, this intuitional voice, and say, "Oh my God, I found it. This is the answer. Wow." And second of all, you'll get it from chance encounters with information and with strangers. Chance encounters. In other words, you'll just come across something at random in a newspaper or a magazine that's a piece of information that's priceless. It's the last piece in the jigsaw puzzle. It puts it all together. Or you'll meet a stranger. And in conversation, it'll turn out that this person had a similar experience, and this is what they learned, and be sure of this. And you say, "Oh my God, that piece of information was absolutely priceless." So be alert to it. I'm sending you a boat. I'm sending you a Jeep. I'm sending you a plane. Once you have a goal, your intuition, your superconscious mind will be trying to get the answer to you. Like a person rushing through the crowd, shouting at you as you're getting away, this superconscious mind is trying to get the answer to you. Hey, I've got the answer. Listen, stop and listen. Almost like it's a game, like it's a fun thing. And three is unexpected events, successes and failures. Peter Drucker wrote a book some years ago called Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And as Peter Drucker did in his lifetime, when he wrote a book, you could just basically throw away the other books. And what he said in this book is that the greatest single source of great products and services is the unexpected success or the unexpected failure. The unexpected success. In other words, you tried something and it had an explosive success. And you say, "Oh my Lord, what is going on here?" And you find out that you've hit the right product or the right service at the right time and so on. Or something that you've done for a long time failed completely. And natural tendency is for people to say, "Wow, that was a lucky success," or "Oh, damn that failure." But what successful people do is they look into it. Why was that so successful? Or why did it fail? Great example. My father was an artist and created an enormous number of sculptor works in London in the 30s. And in the 30s, he was invited to join the Chelsea Arts Club, which is one of the most prestigious, like the Harvard Club of New York. The Chelsea Arts Club was where the creme de la creme, the Bernard Shaws, the top writers, the top artists and poets, the top actors and actresses went. And he said he played billiards with Sir Isaac Fleming. And Isaac Fleming was a doctor and a researcher. And what had happened was, it's an incredible story, by the way. I'll tell you the story quickly because it's so good. What happened was when Sir Isaac Fleming, not Isaac Fleming, what is his name? It'll come to me in a second. His name was Fleming, it wasn't Isaac. But Fleming grew up in a small town in Scotland, came from a poor family. And one day, his father was out on his way home with his wagon, and a car came along and went off the road and got stuck. And the father came along with the wagon and the horse and offered to help him to get his car back on the road. And it was late at night, and it was raining, and it was a really bad situation for the driver. And so he thanked him very much, and he pulled him off, got him off the road. He said, "Is there any way that I can repay you? I'll do anything you like." His name was Sir Randolph Churchill. He was the father of Winston Churchill, and he was on his way to one of the Churchill castles. They were a very wealthy family in Scotland. And he said, no, I can't think of anything, Gov. I can't think of anything. He said, what about your family? He said, well, I got a real bright boy, Alexander Fleming. Got a real bright boy, Alex, but we can never afford to send him to school. He said, I'll tell you what. You come up to the house and I'll send him to school. I'll give him a scholarship. I'll get him into the right school. So we got Alexander Fleming into school, and he was... No, the story's much better than that. Oh, yes. Here's the story. The story was that the car got in a serious accident and... No, okay. No, I got the story. Okay. I got the story. I haven't thought about this story for years, but it's so good. So he said he got him into school, and he went and moved to London, and they got him a place to stay, and they kept in touch with him. And Sir Lord Randolph Churchill kept in touch. He was a very bright boy, very nice boy, grew up, teenager, went to medical school, and so on. And they invited him to join the family at Brighton Beach for their vacation. And so he did, and he was playing with young Churchill, who was about 19 or 20 at the same time. They were just boyhood friends. And Churchill got caught in a riptide and was being pulled out to sea and was going to drown. And Fleming was a good swimmer, and he swam out and saved Churchill's life. And this was in the early part of the century, in the tens of the century. And he saved Churchill's life. And boy, they were really appreciative of that. And he went on back to medical school and began working. In the 20s, he was working on an experiment in his lab, and they had put the algae dish and the culture to grow, and they went out for lunch, and they came back, and they found the culture had been killed by a bacteria that had somehow come from some other part of the laboratory and landed on this culture and killed all the bacteria that was there. And so his assistant said, well, throw it out and we'll try it again. He said, no, that's very strong bacteria. I wonder what killed it. And they traced it back to penicillin spores. He called them penicillin. Penicillin spores that were being used in another experiment had blown across the lab and landed on there and killed all the bacteria. So he took his focus off this bacteria and onto penicillin, experimented for a long time, and he invented penicillin. He invented penicillin, and they began to manufacture it. He found ways to manufacture it artificially. It was very expensive at the beginning. It was so helpful, it literally saved the lives of thousands of people from every imaginable type of infection or disease. He won a Nobel Prize, and became a knight, and became invited into the Chelsea Arts Club, where in the late 30s he played billiards with my father. But now you want to hear the rest of the story. The rest of the story, when Churchill was in Egypt, he came down with a terrible infection during World War II, at the peak of the Alexandrian campaign with Rommel's armies romping across. He came down with an infection, pneumonia, not pneumonia, something else, and they thought he was going to die. And so they contacted England, and they contacted Sir Alexander Fleming. Was there anything he could do? He had developed a special, powerful strain of penicillin, which was flown to Alexandria and given to Churchill and saved his life. So the story was very interesting. From the turned-over car on the road of Scotland, Sir Alexander Fleming saved the life of Winston Churchill on 2 occasions, once when he was young and once when he was the Prime Minister of England. Now, you're talking about serendipity here. You're talking about synchronicity. You talk about superconscious events. Think about all the coincidences that took place there that changed the history of the 20th century because of those coincidences. Now, I'm not saying that will happen to you, especially not you, Randy, but be alert to unexpected successes and unexpected failures, because often they will contain the germ or an idea that will change your life. So how can you tell a superconscious solution? Number one, when the answer comes, it will be 100% complete, and it will be simple. It'll be so simple that you think, why didn't I think of that before? That is so simple. It's so obvious. It's easy to implement. It will be within your resources. You won't have to get anybody else's permission or help. It's something that you can do, and you hit yourself like this. How could I not have thought of that? It will be a blinding flash of the obvious. It'll be so obvious that you'll just be surprised you hadn't thought of it. And 3, it will be accompanied by a burst of energy and joy. The energy that you need to implement the solution will come with the solution. It's almost like the charge that you need to get up. Sometimes you'll have a superconscious solution in the middle of the night, and you'll wake up with this incredible idea, and you'll be able to sit down and start writing it down, and all the energy you need to write it down. And people have done this and written it several pages, and at the end of it, They're exhausted. All the energy is gone. They go back to bed and sleep like a dead person, wake up in the morning and find the notes. This happened with some of the greatest scientists. They found the notes that had written overnight, and the notes contained scientific insights that had never been known to man before. So you will have a feeling of happiness and well-being. It always makes you happy when you have a superconscious solution of any kind. So the law of superconscious activity says that any thought, plan, goal, or idea held continuously in the conscious mind must be brought into reality by the superconscious. Any thought, plan, goal, or idea held continuously in the conscious mind must be brought into reality by the superconscious. This is one of the greatest, and perhaps the greatest of all laws, and is the summary law of everything we've talked about up to now. And the more you use it, the more you believe it, the more it will work for you. The more you absolutely trust in it, and pretty soon you'll get onto this beam where you're getting the answers and the intuitive answers and the answers from the outside for everything that you need in life. The superconscious mind explains the law of attraction. How is it that you attract into your life exactly the right people and circumstances at the right time? It's because you have an absolutely crystal clear goal and you confidently expect it to be realized in exactly the right way at exactly the right time. Always be open to the likelihood that your goal will be achieved in a way completely different from what you had expected. Something completely unusual will happen, and you'll achieve your goal in a way that you never thought of before. Is this helpful so far? Yeah. This is why we've done everything that we've done up to now, because the superconscious mind works with a totally positive attitude. When you're completely positive about yourself and your future, and you have very clear written goals, plans, and priorities, you tap into the greatest power in the universe. And what you can accomplish in the next weeks and months and years will stagger you and completely amaze